Okay.
Okay, welcome to another Bother the Father. We're here on Tuesday, October 18th. So we don't have too many people here, just one. That's okay. Ken, what kind of questions you got?
Okay, all my problems are teenagers.
I'd imagine.
Okay, so all the ones that have reached the age of reason, they always are filled with doubt instead of trust. So is this indicative of my poor parenting, or I'm not worried about it if it is. I just want a good outcome.
Yeah.
But so my question is, how can I reach adolescence? I used to be an adolescent. I remember what it was like.
Sure.
So I try to bear that in mind. But I guess the generations have just changed too much.
Yeah, in some ways not. I mean, I think when we're younger, our priorities are set that are more material, right? I mean, so when you think of like when you were a teenager, when you were teenagers, I think there's a lot more pride put on the fact that like, okay, schoolwork or sports or what are my friends going to think about me, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so what I mean, so yeah, that's what I'm saying. We tend not to look at the spiritual realm as much when you're younger because part of we haven't really experienced too much about it. I mean, ideally, we receive the sacraments, you know, we receive first communion, we receive confession. Maybe by the time we're, you know, in our or early teens, we're at the point of confirmation. But also too, and we talked about this before about the benefits and also the detriment sometimes of Catholic education. My experience K through 12 in Catholic education was religion was sort of basically another class. And my mindset was I go to Mass on Sunday, and that's kind of my faith. Jesus is on Sunday. The rest of the week is kind of mine. The religion class is sort of like basically set up to be like, okay, it's just another class. It's like English or like science or math or whatever. And you know, I don't want to I don't want to blame anybody because I mean I think you know teachers do the best they can. And a lot of teachers that are like a teacher that teaches math may not necessarily have an understanding of theology, just like a teacher teaches theology may not have a good understanding of science. And so a lot of teachers are designed or, you know, put in a place so they have a specialty, they have a expertise, and that's what they teach. I think the trick with Catholic education, I think we're starting to realize this more is, and I think that the nuns of the old used to have a good idea about this because they lived their faith. You can really incorporate that in their what they teach. Not that the lay teachers don't, but I think there's more of an expertise that the teacher feels comfortable with teaching. And a lot of those teachers are not necessarily schooled in theology. So in other words, what I mean by that is, if I were in science class and we were talking about evolution, for instance, the science teacher may have a very good understanding of the scientific biology of evolution and how that happens in the body, how that affects, you know, lower species and even humans from a biological perspective. But they may not be keen on the theological or the philosophical aspect of that. And so if a student were to have a question about, well, wait a minute, how can we really coincide with Genesis, the book of Genesis? We're talking about evolution, where it seems like we're told very explicitly in the book of Genesis that God made everything out of clay. Yet now we're learning that, okay, well, there's a development in our biology and our DNA that incrementally lets us adapt to our environment to where humans came from.
Yeah.
So someone who maybe can explain that from a scientific realm could probably do that. So, well, you know, there's genetic, you know, our genes change based on our environment, and over time, we then develop these aspects of our bodies that were adaptable to the environment so we can actually survive. Now, a theologian or philosopher would say, well, yeah, that seems like part of a design of a process that would be part of an intellectual plan. And so you would have to conclude there'd be some designer, some person that was keeping that going to allow for that to happen. Now, then we can start talking about from the theological aspect, well, okay, what do we mean by a day in Genesis? Is that a literal day we're talking about? Or are we talking about maybe an allegory of how God works in time?
Right.
So I say all that because, yeah, I think as we grow older, we tend to have these questions and start maybe asking those questions, but then we don't always get a sufficient answer.
No.
And so to your point, is it poor parenting? I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, because I think parents probably struggle with the same things, right? In some ways. And so when a child asks a parent, well, hey, mom, dad, how do we coincide our understanding of biological evolution with Genesis? I don't know. That's versus learn that in school, right? I don't know.
But the development is there. The evolution is there.
Yeah,
It's gradual development.
sure. But what I'm saying is,
It's right there.
from parents, I think have the same issue at home.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's just necessarily a one answer. One thing I would maybe caution, or maybe direct. There's nothing wrong with questioning.
No,
Yeah, I tell this, our faith really kind of is directed towards that. We grow in our faith by asking hard questions and thinking about them and praying about them and letting those answers reveal over time. Now, part of that is also have to be comfortable with mystery, because even science will tell us there are certain questions that we don't have an answer for. Now, we don't have an answer for yet, but there are always going to be questions which we don't have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And we won't know that until our faith tells us we won't know that until we're with God in heaven, can see everything for what it is.
Yeah.
Doubt is of a different nature. Doubt is I'm making a conclusion without all the data, without all the information. And so, like, when we talk about the different mysteries of faith, like, how can we say that Jesus comes down and becomes a piece of bread and a piece of a chalice of wine? How does that happen?
Especially when they retain the same accidents.
Right.
It tastes like
Exactly.
wine.
It looks
And
like
the
it,
wafers
smells like
that
it.
you get here taste like the wafers here. And the wafers at St. Joan
Right.
of Arc taste different.
Right.
Because it's a
Right.
different product.
And how's that happen? I mean, most people ask that question, they're asking in a scientific way.
Yeah.
And the problem is we don't have an answer for that.
No.
But science doesn't either, right? So it's one of these things that science will just tell you, well, that's not. It's just a piece of bread and a glass of wine. That's all, or a cup of wine. That's all it is. There's no discernible evidence or empirical data that'll say that this actually is Jesus and not wine and bread. I think, though, we have, from people of faith, can point to, we just had a year a while back with the Eucharistic miracles.
Right.
Well, even science is now saying, oh, wait a minute, there's something about this.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Questioning is good. When you start doubting, though, what you're really saying is, I'm not going to open myself to any more data. I'm going to make this conclusion based on what I have, and I know that this is insufficient.
Yeah.
Right. To actually answer the question.
Yeah. Well, what you said initially about they're more material, that really rings.
Sure.
And it was definitely true with me in my youth,
Well, I mean, it seemed kind
I
of
was
worse.
worried about what I was doing.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn that and go here and make this. And it was very material. But why is it? Because I really didn't have a need for the spiritual.
Well,
I hadn't gotten in any trouble, really.
I think that's kind of true.
Nothing significant.
I think it's even worse today, though, because you can add on the fact of like social media and all these technological advances that we have that children now have access to. It even compounds it. But to that end, I think to your point, why do we do that? Well, that's kind of because we as human beings, we learn experientially, right? So in other words, like, okay, if let's say I go to Mass every Sunday and I receive the Eucharist every Sunday and I listen to the words and I sit there while the priest groans on about whatever he's talking about and I leave. Okay, I just had a spiritual experience, but I didn't receive anything in it, right? Because my priority isn't necessarily something that's directed towards the spiritual. My priority is, well, hey, who was there? Were my friends there? Did they see me there? Did maybe people who maybe don't like me, were they there? Did they see me there? Oh, yeah, what did that boy or girl think about me? My hair looks all messy. What were they thinking about me? Well, I got homework to do. Shoot, I gotta get home and do that before school tomorrow. We call that the mode of the receiver, right? And one thing that our faith teaches us, which I don't think is received very well from in a general standpoint, is we have an understanding that our learning in the faith, our spiritual growth doesn't end. That
Never.
just as we mature emotionally and physically and mentally, we're also called to mature spiritually. But most of us end that spiritual maturity at 8th grade because, well, I received confirmation. That's a graduation, I'm done. I'm going to high school and learning theology here, but basically that's it. I don't have to grow anymore because I got everything I need.
Yeah, most people aren't thinking about like marriage
Mhm.
or the holy orders at that point.
Well, even people
Because
that
they're
do, so
14.
even couples that come to me that are getting ready for marriage, I mean, I would say most couples that come to me probably have the maturity, the spiritual maturity level of 8th graders.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
when we ended, right?
But they've never been pushed farther
Well, and
because
Dorothy,
life hasn't to make. My wife and our whole existence is putting. We're still like that mother bird putting food in our kids'
mm,
mouths. I'm spending all of the money I make
yeah,
on them.
yeah,
So what
yeah.
if they don't really have any needs?
Well, I think there's something about that though too. I mean, Dorothy Day used to say that you go through two conversions, one at your baptism and another later in life. So, in other words, your parents do the right thing by getting you baptized and giving you the building blocks of the faith.
Right?
But at some point, you as an adult have to accept it, right?
Categorically.
Yeah. And I think we all have that experience at some point, especially those of us that are engaged in the faith. We think we realize that, yeah, maybe, I really wasn't as engaged as I should have been in high school and college, but,
No.
there got to the point where maybe it was when we first got married or started having kids, or someone just kind of like shifted us in some way to look at the faith in a new way, that we started actually growing and picking up where we left off to grow spiritually. We all kind of need that. And I think we're seeing society today that's not happening as much. We may ask the question, well, why? Is it social influence? Is it peer influence? Is it are our parenting skills not as good as they were 20, 30, 40 years ago? I don't know. I don't think it's just a one size fits all answer. I think it's kind of a mixture of a bunch of things.
It is.
But to your point, I mean, to be a mother and a father these days is incredibly difficult. And I think it takes a lot of perseverance and faith and trust to tell your children, even if they don't want to go to mass or on Sunday or whatever, well, we're going to mass. That's the rule that I have in this house. I will say that my mom, that was a policy. We made it a priority that you're going to mass on Sunday, and even if we're going out of town, we're going to find a church to go to mass on vacation.
Yeah, we do the same thing.
Right. Now, between me and my sisters, I would say I was always kind of lax, I think, in the faith. I mean, I still believed, I still trusted that what the church taught was true, and I tried to grow. I didn't really grow much in my understanding of what the church taught after 8th grade, I think. But there came to a point where those building blocks my parents gave me, they started to sprout, take root, and grow.
They planted seeds.
Exactly.
They just
Now,
hadn't blossomed yet.
I have a couple sisters who maybe are not practicing the way they should, right? And they were raised in the same house, even the same instruction. Now,
Sure.
will they eventually? I hope,
Who knows?
right? I hope. Will I be alive when that happens? I hope.
Yeah.
I don't know, right?
Well, Mary believes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know her well, but I know. So that just goes back to the mode of the
We
receiver.
call the mode of the receiver.
It's funny, you started with that and then you really just explained it all. And that explains my personal existence.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so what does the church call? And some guy in Catholic Answers mentioned it a couple weeks ago. I said, I gotta remember that. And that internal conversation one has with God. What is that called?
Well,
internal dialogue, person?
Well, sure. I mean, that's a form of, well, I mean, it's really a form of meditative prayer.
Yes.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what is that officially called? It had a really catchy name.
I have to think about that. So internal dialogue with God, like happening in your mind.
Is internal dialogue the personal conversation you have with God?
Well, it could be, but internal dialogue also be a conversation you have with yourself,
Yeah.
right? We would say that the directive that we're given internally, it comes from our conscience, right? I mean, our conscience is really our moral compass
But
that is
what
given
is
by
that
God.
thing
Conscience?
that has led me astray a lot?
Well, I mean,
And
part of that's free will, but also part of that could also be, well, I mean, there's temptation and influence everywhere, right?
yeah, so how do you, yeah, there's no answer. I know.
No,
There's no way you
right.
can know, oh, what's my free will and
Well, unless we're talking about,
what is my conscience?
are they talking
You
about
never know, you get
are
tricked so much.
they talking about natural law? Natural law is something that we would uphold too. So natural law would be like
No.
okay.
It was the internal individual conversation you have with God. They had a great term for it. I think
We'll see here. Maybe we can Google this.
internal, was it called internal dialogue?
I mean, that could be
Something, for some reason, I'm thinking dialogue was in the term. Because so many times, wow, that it has been wrong, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all this let's see. There's an inner conversation that you're saying. That's the internal dialogue.
The voice.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not on there. Huh. It was some theologian on Catholic radio.
Catholic radio?
Yeah.
Type that and see what comes up. Let's see. I'll go ahead and share this too, just so everyone can see what I'm actually looking at.
Oh, all this is online?
Oh yeah, we're recording all this. I don't have to post it if you don't want me to, but I mean, you know, we usually post these too. Okay, presence of God, doctrinal, devotional practices. Was this what you were talking about? Was this the one? It was on the radio though, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
But that may have been audio from a video
Oh yeah, it
recording.
could be. I mean, podcast. That's usually what they are.
Podcast, yes.
Um,
Okay, well, I guess it's not a common term then.
I mean,
Internal dialogue, I guess that's what it was.
internal dialogue. That could be what they were talking about. I mean, because that's really we're talking about. So that could be right because even a dialogue indicates there's two. So it wouldn't necessarily be an internal
Yes.
dialogue if you're talking to yourself. That would be more of an internal monologue. So yeah, it could be internal dialogue. That could make sense. Yeah, but I mean, we'd also recognize too that the conscious has a really important aspect of that when it talks about our conversation with God, but also we look at those different forms of prayer, whether they're rote, meditative, or contemplative. And meditative and contemplative kind of take different avenues depending what school of spirituality you talk about. So, like for instance, the Jesuits look at meditative prayer primarily just an intellectual endeavor.
All right.
So, in other words, like okay, like for instance, when I was working from Boeing, if I had a problem that I was trying to think about on a particular issue, I may turn to prayer and ask God what I need to do, and that would be more of a meditative aspect of the problem at hand with God's direction. That's a form of meditative prayer. One thing that I was never really engaged in until I actually got into the seminary and started, getting deeper in my faith was contemplative prayer. And contemplative actually takes different forms too. Like so, the Carmelite tradition, like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, their understanding of like contemplative prayer is like this ecstatic state where you kind of have this experience of heaven, right? So that's what they would consider to be contemplative.
Did they describe that as a loss of earthly worries?
Yeah, I mean, so it's really this like kind of
any earthly negativity.
Well, when Paul talks about, he went up to like the third heaven, whatever that means.
Yeah,
and that's
I read that.
that's sort of like contemplative, right?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that. It's really,
Yeah.
you're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, right.
You walk out and you say, it doesn't matter.
It would be considered like a holy indifference, right? Yeah.
A holy,
and even
yeah.
even the Jesuits kind of have this respect for that too. They kind of have an understanding that contemplative is more of it's actually more experiential. So in other words, you kind of put yourself in all your senses into this particular scene or aspect to receive something from God. So they look at that primarily for like a Lectio style prayer. Like you kind of look at the scriptures and you put yourself, immerse yourself in the scriptures completely. So the nations even talk about like, okay, imagine like it's a form of an imaginative prayer, but it's also use of the senses where what would it, so like let's say you're at the birth of Jesus, right? You're in Bethlehem, you're there.
Yeah.
What does it smell like? Is
it
it
animals?
Right. Is it sunny? Is it rainy? Is it dark? Is it light? Is it cold? Is it hot?
Yeah.
And so they would have you go through like this whole sensual kind of inventory before you even get to the actual fruit of the meditative prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And they would consider that to be contemplative. And so that's what I'm saying. Different schools kind of have different understandings of what those mean.
But
So,
are they essentially the same?
For the most part. I mean, they all kind of intertwine with each other in some ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, to that point, we talk about spiritual maturity. I mean, it took me 35 years before I even got to that point. Right? Most of it just because I never experienced it, but also I didn't really look for it. You know, because most of my early adulthood and late teens was like, okay, where am I going to go to college? What am I going to study? After college, am I going to find a girlfriend? Am I going to start a family?
Yeah.
Am I going to move to Seattle, St. Louis? I mean, so we have these more material decisions, right?
Yeah.
That kind of even influence our adult lives. And so, yeah, I don't think it's just there's not really a one answer when it comes to these things, right?
No.
And you're not the only one to struggle with these. I think many people deal with like, I talk to people all the time where it's like, Father, what can I mean, these are adult children. What can I do to bring my kids back to the faith?
St. Monica was saying that in the 300s. Wasn't it the 300s?
That's right. Right. And she prayed off to you all the time. And she was, I mean, the benefit
she set a good example for the guy.
And she was able to see at least her son's conversion, but she never saw him ordained.
Oh, she died before that?
Yeah. And so I think from a parent's perspective, that's kind of the struggle too. You know, whenever we get into ministry, one of the things they always tell us is that we have to be okay with not seeing the fruit of our efforts.
Oh yeah, that's faith, that's trust.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of
what's hoped for.
I think that's truth for not only people in ministry, but even parents and anyone else.
Yeah. That
we have to be okay with, like, with our children who maybe were struggling with the faith. We may not see them come to reconcile with the faith in our lifetime. But we have to trust that God's going to take care of them.
We have to trust that God will vigorously punish them.
Well, maybe that too.
Which nobody ever talks about anymore, which really bothers me.
Maybe sometimes
my whole life, it was strict when I went to CBC and St. Gabriel. We were afraid of the teachers, and now it's just well, whatever you feel like.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, okay.
Again, part of that societal, I think, too.
My dad used to say.
Yeah.
He's like, spank them. I was like,
Spare the rods.
I don't know if it works, and it didn't.
Well, it did. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, like I know when I was going to grade school, they still had it optional that parents allowed them to do corporal punishment in school. You had to sign a release or whatever. And they were like, yeah, fine, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, and if you say that around parents, they don't like that.
Oh yeah.
I was somewhere, and I was like, "We're leaving," and the kids were just totally ignoring me. I'm like, "Who got rid of corporal punishment?"
Here's what you do next time.
These are my peers looking at me.
Just leave. That's how I do. Just leave. That's how I do. I mean, so
yeah, leave them there.
Oh, yeah, just leave there.
Exactly.
We're leaving, so let's go. We're not gonna go.
That's the only thing that works.
Right.
And if you're in Columbia, Illinois, they'll notice. They know it.
Yeah.
They know it. They'll follow you.
Exactly right.
But I was right up the street, so they didn't follow me.
Well,
because they know that.
Well, that's fine. Then they're walking. See, I think that's the other thing too. I think these parents also have lost the sense of causation and effect. Right. So look, we have to start looking at that more deeper, right? So okay, look, we're leaving at 5 o'clock. And I'm going to turn the car on at 5 o'clock and grab the car, I'm going. Right? Yeah. That's how we're going to do it. And so now if you get stuck, well, you can find your own way and good luck, right? I think
But what happens after that?
Well, but see, that's what I'm saying. I think in ways that builds character. And yeah, people, they may be pissed off and are going to be, okay, so what?
Oh yeah, and then they tell mom, and then I get in trouble.
Well, I mean, part of that's having mom on the same page, right? I mean, so that's kind of part of it too. I mean, you have to have a unified front in many ways. But I mean, but that's the thing. I think we kind of lost. I mean, now I even see this with well, not really so much my nieces and nephews anymore. Maybe some of the other ones, but like now it's like timeouts. And like I don't understand the concept of timeout. So I do something wrong, you're gonna put me in the corner for 5 seconds or 5 minutes.
It works with little
Okay.
kids because they've got ants in their pants.
Sure, that could
And
be.
they can't sit still
Yeah.
for a minute.
But the other side of the coin though is you have to keep on monitoring that to make sure they don't leave.
Right. So who's in punishment?
Right, yeah, right. You know.
I need to fold the laundry.
Mhm.
I need to make a telephone call.
Right.
Oh, but I gotta watch you.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we have to be more creative in the way we discipline children. And I think the other thing you have to understand too, that disciplining a child is not an act of hatred.
That's the opposite. It's love.
It's an act of love.
Preventing them from going in pitfalls.
And there's better or worse ways we can do that. But I think, you know, we look at, as long as you do it's directed towards a place of love and come from a place of love, good. There's no sin involved with that.
Yeah, what does Jesus say? If who would hand their, what does he say, neighbor or son, a snake if
their child's sick, they ask for an egg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're protecting them from that, even though they intellectually can't understand it.
Right.
So,
well, and part of that too, I think.
Well, I want to stay up all night, and I don't want to go to school.
Well, I think part of that too is as a parent, and this maybe takes more time and energy, but part of that is actually just kind of explaining what the consequence of the actions will be.
Yeah. Cause and effect.
Yeah,
we're back to your causation.
You want to stay up all night? Okay, well then you're going to be all sleepy tomorrow. You're going to be able to go through your school day and not be able to sleep anything. You're going to be tired and cranky, and you're going to come home and you're going to fall asleep at 4:00 p.m. anyway, sleep all through the night.
Yeah.
So you want to do that.
One of my older kids this weekend said, "Oh, I'm going back to 9:30 bedtime."
Good growth, right? Yeah.
It makes life easier.
That's right. That's right.
In the military, they put us to bed at 9 o'clock.
Nothing good happens after midnight. Let's put it that way. I know that much. But yeah, I mean,
we were worn out.
Sure. Yeah.
And we had to get up for fire watch. But we went to what? I never got sick once in 4 years.
There's something.
Never. Surrounded by hundreds of people, dirty people, never got sick once.
There's something about
because we ate on a schedule, we slept on it. I mean, you have to get up and get duty.
Well, also too, I mean,
but for the most part, there is a firm schedule.
Well, not only a health benefit, but there's also spiritual benefit. I mean, when you think about how when temptation starts to like creep in on us, it's usually when we're tired or hungry or feeling anxious or we're feeling lonely or stressed, right? And so if we take precautions in our schedule to ensure that doesn't happen, we don't have the temptation as much, right?
True.
So there's physical and spiritual benefits from having a regular bedtime and having a regular schedule.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's kind of fascinating. But again, we need that emotional and that spiritual maturity to make that a habit.
Yeah.
And that's where
suffer.
Right. Right.
Punishment helps you suffer.
It does. Suffering's not a bad thing. We're no closer to Jesus when we're suffering.
Yeah.
We're suffering that cross with them. That's good.
Like, did you ever read that book? Is it The Dark Knight Elie Wiesel. I forgot the title of his book. He was a Holocaust kid. Oh yeah. Young, and the Holocaust survived.
Oh, was that about Kristallnacht or was it about
No, being in one of the camps.
Yeah, okay. All right, wow.
He said every step was a prayer because he knew he could be murdered at any moment.
Well, I think it goes back to your point too when you talked about earlier. I mean, you know, oftentimes we see the faith diminish in like first world countries because there is no need for it.
Yeah, there's no.
You know, it's flourished in like places like third world or developing worlds because
Nigeria.
There's a great need for it.
They're being persecuted.
Sure. Yeah, that's where the church flourishes under the blood of martyrs.
Yeah.
And so
many parents become very spiritual and begin relying on Jesus Christ because their life is hard.
When tragedy
You're
hits,
like,
that's
oh
when
my
yes.
gosh, I'm in over my
Yeah.
head. I can't handle this.
Most people turn to the faith when tragedy comes about. And it's good, but also it'd be better if you maintain that faith before that. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the thing is that yeah, we all need the grace that comes from the sacraments in our faith. But oftentimes we only turn to it when we have no other choice.
Yeah.
And that's the same for children as it is really for adults too. Because I think there hasn't been that development in the spiritual realm for people after 8th grade or after confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah. But then the ball's in their court.
It is, it's
their
true.
responsibility.
It's true. I mean, that's why we have stuff like this. We have, we open up the RCA to people that come on Sunday mornings. Monsignor has the Bible study every last Tuesday. We do these things so we can actually help people engage in that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and if I may say so, engage, you know this. You use technology a lot. That's the way to reach people under the age of 50.
It is.
That you're not going to reach them if you don't, because
right.
their lifestyle is just a lot of.
Well, I will say this. I think there's been a few people last couple of years with the pandemic that if we didn't post these sessions online, they would have come into the church.
Yeah, it's the bishops, the church hierarchy has to get online.
Yeah.
If you're going to reach people, because I'm 53 and all of my peers are online a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, at work, I'm online.
I'm
online at work.
It's also the right type of media. I mean, so like, I think our generation, you're Gen X, right? We're Gen X. Then,
yeah, I'm Gen X.
I think a lot of them are on Facebook. But if you're under the age of like 40, Facebook is not the media. It's like stuff like Instagram or TikTok, or that kind of stuff. And so I think the struggle the church has is they look at technology as morally neutral, which it is. But the problem you get into is, okay, well, now we're going to start putting stuff on like TikTok, but TikTok has some connotations with it that are morally objectionable.
Oh.
And so do we want to be associated with that, or do we look at this as a way to sanctify these areas?
But it is an opportunity.
Sure, I agree. But
like the bishops?
Yep.
Why doesn't Archbishop Rosansky, he should make TikTok videos?
Well, I think
hey, faithful, you get 15 seconds, take it.
I think the same discernment.
He should say, everyone in St. Louis, I want you to see this.
I think the same discernment applies because, I mean,
boom.
They
don't want to listen to a long, boring lecture or read a long book.
The church
got
universal,
a 15-second lesson right there.
The church universal, though, usually takes its time.
I know.
And so because they do that because it's wise to do so, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
but you're gonna save more people that way.
Fair. I think it's fair statement.
Get online. What are you waiting for? Make TikTok videos.
It's also an indictment, I think, of our society today that we've gotten to a point now where we have to have everything in 15-second bites, or else we don't receive anything.
Yeah, but God knows that. He knew that would come along.
Maybe he did, but he didn't. But that's the thing, though.
It's not morally wrong. There's nothing wrong with it.
Did he necessarily will that? And I think that's really the big question.
Yes, because it's universal.
I don't know if it is.
It is.
Well, if it were universal, it would apply for every time and every age.
Yeah, exactly. So Saint Monica and Saint Augustine could watch a TikTok video. They would understand the message. They would understand it. Absolutely.
Granted. What I'm saying is, though,
and someone in outer space.
But we as human beings have exhibited that we have the capacity to have an attention span longer than 30 seconds as a people.
That's the average?
Well, give or take.
No, I understand.
So what I'm saying is, if something would be universal, it would say that, okay, it is based on human capacity, not human desire or human actuality.
Yeah.
So to say that, okay, we have to have everything down to 15-second bites. I think what that does in reality is pull us out of the moment. You know, and
Or
really,
is it an introduction? Is it a
it
hook?
could be, no, it could be. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying though that we can't
a
just
hook.
be, it can't just be 30-second bites. You know, but I think we've gotten to the point now where it has to be, or else people don't pay attention.
Yeah, it's there. Let's use it. It's
I
there.
don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm just saying that I think we need to get past the whole, or at least maybe find a way to engage. Because here's the other thing too. I tell the RCA candidates, you know, when our session first began, it's impossible for anybody to teach 2,000 years of Catholic teaching 1 hour a week for 28 weeks. Impossible. I can't do it. Nobody can do it.
No.
Now I can maybe introduce something for 30 seconds, say, okay, great. Now go ahead and go on your own and try to
Go
figure
Google
out.
it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can do that, but even then, there's still a lack.
Come to Google it. They
Yeah.
will. They will.
Oh, I know they will. But the question is, but in the same way, the motor receiver, right? Am I receiving more from that Google search, or by having a conversation with Father Mark every morning at 9 o'clock?
Yeah, that's motor receiver.
It is. It is.
But at least we would be evangelizing.
True.
Yeah. The
So I
bishops
think-
need to make TikTok.
I think there are many ways we
Children and adolescents,
Sure.
they will lay down on the sofa and spend an hour and a half watching videos, heart,
I will
scroll.
say I found
which is fine. It's okay. It's very relaxing. It's entertaining. So stick some religion in there.
I will say last year I found it kind of helpful, and I don't know. I have to go back and maybe talk to the students over in that class.
You're gonna get a buzz out of that.
Well, what
especially if he wears his mitre
no
and his vestments, those kids are gonna be like, "What is that?
Well,
That's not Lululemon. That's not."
I'm saying I found it helpful though. Like last year, I was teaching logic to the 8th graders, and I was using memes to form syllogisms.
Yes, memes. Yes.
And I thought that was very helpful for them because at least it kind of kept paying attention. But even that, I found that once I just showed them the meme, they were turned off. Right. And so I used the meme as a hook to say, okay, here's what this meme is really arguing. And here may be the counter argument to it. But they were just looking at the meme. They didn't necessarily care about anything else. Like, oh, the meme's funny. Yeah, okay. What does it really say though? What is the argument it's making?
I don't know. You sure they weren't? It wasn't registering.
I think
maybe not.
There were a few, but I think for at least half, I think were kind of like, okay, next meme. All right, what's the next meme?
Then they weren't mentally mature enough to
Correct.
even learn.
Correct.
Yeah.
So again, I think
But the 16-year-olds can. Mary Bethy can.
Sure.
Franny can. Oh, they come up.
Yeah.
They come at me with good questions about
Good.
not going to mass. And yeah,
Good. Good. I mean, that's what I'm saying. As long as they're asking questions, good.
They've already given me. Well, I'm already saved. I don't have to go to
boy.
mass.
Boy, oh boy.
So.
Oh, that's a very Protestant attitude. Well, I mean, I think the answer to that too would be, well, hopefully you are, but we won't know that until we're with God.
Oh, I remind them the
right.
hellfire. And stuff. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not even just that. It's just that, like, okay, well, God, we're supposed to follow Christ's footsteps. Well, Christ, as soon as Christ was born, we were saved. As soon as he was born, he was
really?
saved. Well, from the moment that the umbilical cord was cut and the blood was shed, we were reconciled with God.
No kidding.
Yeah. So then the question remains, well, then why did Jesus do all this stuff?
Right.
Well, because he set an example for us to follow him. He gives a mission in his mission.
Yeah.
And if he did what he did, he could just rest on his laurels like, well, we're done, peace. I'm going to live my life and then die and then eventually or whatever and be resurrected. So we wouldn't know about it. But I think when you look at faith and religion, what you have to ask is, what is it asking of you? And if it's not asking anything of you, that's not a true faith. That's not a true religion.
No, it's not a religion.
Right? So we have to be conscious of those things. And yeah, you get that, we get that a lot sometimes, like sola scriptura, and Jesus already died for our sins. Yeah, he did, but that doesn't mean you should keep on singing. So it's always an interesting discussion. I think there's definitely a appeal, I think, to that theology. That, oh yeah, I don't have to do anything because I already saved.
Yeah, that's
okay,
very
good.
nihilistic
Sure,
and
sure.
well then let's just mow down all the plants and
Right,
make comfortable buildings for us to live
Right.
in and don't worry about the streams and the air and the
well, and that's
oh wait a
where,
minute. No, we need that. Well, yeah,
that's the thing.
you
That's
were
where
created for God's handiwork, wherever that is.
that's where
Timothy or
that's where
Ephesians.
relativism comes from.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, it's very relativistic. You think, well, okay, well, hey, I'm just gonna live my life and I'm gonna
Yeah.
do what I gotta do.
yeah,
Well, what's good for you should be good for everyone.
yeah, that's
You know,
yeah.
but it's always an interesting discussion, and we can only do the best we can when it comes to our children.
Yeah, I don't say much anymore because the less I say, the better. I'm too ignorant.
I don't think it's anything about ignorance. I think just about. I think the evangelical nature of parents is that they show their love to their children. Because the love that parents have for their child is the love that God has for us.
What about those moments when you don't love them? We don't have to show anything, do we?
Well, no, here's the thing. Here's the thing. You may not like them all the time. That's different than not loving them.
I agree.
Right? Yeah. I don't like everyone I come in contact with. I still love them because I'm called to love them.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And vice versa. They
That's
don't
right.
like me.
That's right.
But
So, yeah.
thank God I've reached an age where I don't care.
Yeah, that's not supposed to be too. That's not supposed to be too, that's for sure. That's good.
So anyway.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Well, thanks for coming. Hey, we're the only ones tonight. Hopefully we'll give them a good show. That worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next week, if not sooner. God bless.